Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It is a beautiful, beautiful morning again, as it is every morning. It is awesome. And I'm coming to you live on YouTube with broadcast number 148. Just two more and it'll be 150. And my subject again this morning is the same as always: ways of building communities of health and prosperity using TBC and free energy. I don't have the free energy actually typed in there. Maybe I should have that written in the title as well. But here we are in 2018 in a world that has faced much, how should we say, that has been run by people whose intention literally was to run everything into the ground. And now I don't know how about you, but I've been hearing quite a lot about people wondering what is going on in Antarctica. And you're probably asking yourself right now, well, what has that got to do with TBC? Well, let's see if we can connect some dots that will make some sense. Antarctica, for quite a few years now, there has been a lot of activity in Antarctica. And of course, people speculate all kinds of things. What may be going on at Antarctica, because the world isn't told anything about it. Humanity is kept completely in the dark as to what's going on in Antarctica. When the first atomic bomb was built, there were, what was it, 8,000 people working on it? Not one of them knew what they were working on. Now, we got to ask ourselves, how is it possible to keep humanity in the dark to that extent? Wow. Well, we have become quite aware lately of the the fake media. Some call it mockingbird media. And now this fake media, thank God, has much less effect on humanity today than it did, say what, 2 years ago, or even, should we say, 1 year ago. Rapidly, very rapidly, people are catching on as to what is happening, or what has been happening, as it is being reversed quite aggressively right now, which I believe we ought to be very grateful for. Now, I think we as humanity, we have this sort of concept that because I'm a nice person and the people that I'm associating with, yeah, some of them may be a little nasty now and then, but I mean, after all, you know, life is hard and whatever. And so we can excuse the fact that some people maybe have some uh, temper issues, or whatever. We got some problems, right? But do we, have we given it much thought that there are people sitting in the shadows behind the scenes, completely hidden from humanity as if they don't exist, and there they are sitting and playing God, playing, or how should we say, having the entire world, the entire global structure, the power structure, not the earth itself, but the power structure in humanity, having it all structured in such a way that they can remain in the shadows, hidden, and pull all the strings to bring the entire world to destruction? Seriously. And now I want to remind us of a scripture. Oh, Diana Gordon, thank you so much for tuning in. I noticed you're there. Thank you very much for coming on, tuning in. And I hope I'm not letting you down with what I'm talking about, because I want to make this connection, why we have TBC and what we are, what our plan is with it. Now, as we look at this, and and Antarctica, what has been going on? These people sitting in the shadows, having all of the work, all the destructive work, all the work of, how should we say, of building their heaven, that will keep them safe and sound while they're destroying the rest of humanity. Folks, have you connected any dots yet? What's going on at Antarctica? It's far enough away from humanity elsewhere, from all of the countries. It's far enough away that they can literally burn the entire place down, destroy all of humanity on the earth, while they're sitting there in their Antarctica, feeding on what? On people that they have captured, that they that have no choice but to be butchered and eaten by them. So we can look at this a couple of different ways. And the things that I have just described here are so utterly insane that a person would think that no one would ever do such a thing, because the insanity of that is just so gross. But then, have we given it any thought that these are actually not people? You see, that's why they are not actually people. They don't have a conscience. If you haven't, if you're not aware of what is, what these creatures are, then get very familiar with David Icke's teachings. And I don't believe David Icke is the only one that has done in-depth studies about this. Now, myself, I haven't really done any research. I am passing on information that that has been researched by others, and have reached my own conclusions as to what to believe. Now, granted, for the first while, excuse me, for the first while, as as I came across this information, and so on, I really asked myself, is it possible? Is there really, it is something like this? Would something like this actually be going on? And the clear answer is yes. Yes. And we've been warned about it for thousands of years, but we never saw the warnings. We never saw the warnings. I said thousands. It may not be thousands. I think it's. I think it would only be hundreds since the Bible was printed. Now, in the Bible, we are warned about it. It is basically told us, if you study the book of Revelation, which I actually used to do a lot. I used to do a lot. There was a time when I was very scared about the book of Revelation, but then I heard, my dad and some other people, they had their conclusions about things, and some of their conclusions in my mind was like, well, I can't see it that way. I just couldn't, I couldn't see it the way they were seeing it. And yet I had to almost partially agree that maybe it is kind of like that, but somehow the details just didn't quite jive. And as I then began to study the book of Revelation, I came up with very different conclusions. And one of the conclusions that I came up with, and I kept on saying to myself, this can't hardly be true. And yet there was something that was telling me that it is true. And it may shock you when I tell you what that is, because it talks about the beast that is rising out of the sea. The beast that is rising out of the sea. And my conclusion to that was that beast is the Catholic Church. Wow. Wow, really? And but I of course, I mean, how's that possible? How can that be the Catholic Church? There was very much that I didn't know about the Catholic Church. But having this idea that there is one Pope over all of humanity, yeah, it had to be. It had to be. And now that we have that much of this has been uncovered. Much of this has been uncovered. We realize what the Pope, what are their rituals? Do you know? Do you know? Do you have any idea what kind of rituals the Catholic Pope, what they're doing? It's, you know, killing babies, drinking the baby's blood. Those are their rituals, folks. That's the rituals of a Catholic Pope. So where does all of this come from? Why would humanity, why was church? Where does that come from? Why is there such a thing as church? Now, why? Then we also ask the question, how come that the church, as it began, if we go through the history, the church history, there's a book called Mennonites in Europe, which is very much of, where very much of my knowledge of church life or the church history comes from. There's much in there about the the medieval times and things like that, but also from before that. Very much of church history is in there. And I guess that is probably where my conclusion came from when I was studying Revelation. That somehow there are people that have far too much power over humanity. And even though I did not nearly understand, I didn't nearly have the information as to the bottom of it, where all this begins and so on. But just the fact that the Pope, that there is one so-called Pope over all of humanity. But you see, I think we're one of the biggest hurdles that they encountered in, because of the way the Bible has been written. There is, I personally believe that the Bible is holding very, very much truth that is very helpful to humanity if we understand it. However, if we find out the editing that has been done to the ancient information that has originally been written by very knowledgeable people, people who were of high spiritual understanding, this information has been very much edited when it was put into book form, which is the King James Bible is the original Bible that was written. Well, huge amounts of editing has been done to not give away too much of the information that would empower us, but instead make it very confusing. Because there was a purpose that they had in mind. And that is to get humanity to not believe in the power of themselves, that they are part, on the spiritual plane, we are one with creation, with the Creator. But that was not, we were not to know that, supposed to understand that. And then we get through all of these studies, all of the books interrelating to each other in many ways. These books which hold so much truth, especially some of the New Testament books, holding so much truth when we understand. But then comes the book of Jude, the book of Revelation, and then there's the book of Daniel, which corresponds, the book of Daniel being the Old Testament, and then we have Revelation, and there's correspondence there, and that makes it sound and look and makes it all like as if there is this this spiritual kind of a force that nobody understands and that is going on in the background, in the dark, which we do not understand. And ultimately, there will be a complete destruction upon humanity by the what? Wrath of God. Those who know not God and do not and obey not the gospel of Jesus Christ. Do you know what it says in Revelations? This is this book was written and made to correspond with Old Testament scriptures to confuse humanity and make us believe that this is all natural. This is all naturally coming. The world is coming to an end. Which is why nothing is said to humanity about what they are doing in Antarctica. So what are they doing there? Well, when we put all of this together and realize what their plan has been, I think we could come to a conclusion that that is supposed to be their ride out place where they're going to ride out the storm while humanity perishes from their toxic gases or whatever, all their radiation that they're right now setting up to do, the G5 towers and all of this that they have been pushing as hard as they could. And hopefully we waken up enough humanity to counteract all of it. But while they cook humanity, while they bake us alive with this radiation, they're planning to ride out the storm at Antarctica. Does that connect some dots? John, you have to say what is happening in Antarctica and who they are. What has been going on? There is very little or probably hardly anything been revealed. Basically, Antarctica, there has been very much activity. They have huge internet cables going there. And there's been very much activity. As to my knowledge, so far, nobody has come to the rest of the world to tell us what they're doing there. And now, one of the things that I'm sure that we can find more information about it still. Now, I don't really have very much of details of what's going on, but all I have is what other people have been conclusions that some other people have drawn, that is what they're that is very likely what is going on there. And knowing what has been happening and connecting those dots with what I have studied in the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation and Jude and these kind of things, the book of Peter, as well as some other scriptures, some of the Gospels as well. Jesus talks about some of these things. So, and I know for many people, learning about the Bible having been written for such a purpose is extremely difficult to believe. But the thing is, folks, somebody was in charge. Somebody was in charge as to what was going to be written. Somebody was in charge as to what the purpose the Bible was to serve. Looking at the beginning of the church age was the Catholic Church is what started. And knowing, having come to an understanding what the Catholic Church, what is at the core of the Catholic Church, there's only one conclusion to be made. One of my points that I stressed or talked about a little bit earlier here and didn't really finish was that one of their greatest downfalls, or one of their, how should I say, because they have written the Bible in such a way that there is enough spiritual understanding that we can get from it in order to realize that grace is not destructive. The word that they use in the Bible as grace, it's not a destructive word. It is a word of power. It is a word of giving us the ability to live, as it says in the Bible, above sin. Then we got to ask the question, what exactly is sin? Sin is the misunderstanding. Sin is when we don't understand our spiritual powers. Not this idea of that we are evil by nature. That's not it. What it is that the lack of spiritual understanding of the actual powers that we have on the spiritual plane. Not understanding that is what the Bible calls sin. But of course, they don't give us a clear explanation about that. Now, in the medieval times, there was there was reformations. If you've ever studied any of that stuff, there were Reformation leaders, out of which one of them was Martin Luther. Another was Ulrich Zwingli, which I think many more people are aware of Martin Luther, much more than of Zwingli. And if you do your research and your studies, I think you will find that Zwingli was actually probably maybe even more influential at one point than Luther was, except for the fact that Zwingli turned back on his own word. He started out by teaching the Reformation, very much similar to, or should I say, very similar to that of Luther's teachings. But then he turned back on his word. He actually ended up persecuting the very people that he had taught the Reformation idea. But this Reformations, they brought people back to a much more of a spiritual understanding. And that created a huge conflict against the Catholic Church, which is why the Catholic Church so persecuted those people, those churches. How does all of this have anything to do with TBC? Well, let's bridge a bit of a gap here, because I believe that even though the creator of TBC, I don't know how much background they know about church, about all of these things, but what they saw, the way the banking system has overtaken all of the banks, has in the entire world, ends up being controlled by money. The one thing that humanity needs, that we basically, it's all set up that we basically have to have money in order to live, and they have control of that. This is what has given them the power to do what they've been doing. Now, what has happened lately is that people like David Icke and a few others, by the way, if you're not familiar with David Icke, with his teachings, I would highly recommend that you that you find out what David Icke is all about. Okay, who he is and what he's been through in order to get the information out to people. This is amazing. And so, as I was saying, the creators of TBC may not have known all of this, but they definitely saw what was going on and where things are going, where we are headed, unless we do something about it. And now, as Trump has been elected president and is working on this monetary reset worldwide, I know that humanity could just say, whew, thank God, thank God there is finally a president who stands up and so on. But listen, at the longest that a president has ever served is how many years? Okay, let's ask ourselves that question. Sometimes maybe 8, maybe, I don't know, maybe up to 10, maybe, but I think that's pushing it. And I could be wrong. Maybe there has been some that were more than it. I don't know. But let's say Trump would serve for 10 years, okay? And he's gained control over all of this. And the monetary systems is all back in all of the hands of every country, which it was at one point. Okay? And Trump ends up not being president anymore. And we end up with presidents who are wimps like they've always been, except for maybe Andrew Jackson and I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 others. I don't know exactly how many, but we do know that almost all of the presidents were always, they were in with the deep state, with the cabal, and how they have overpowered every country just by approaching the leader who did not have the guts to stand against them. So if that happened once worldwide, what are the chances of that happening again if the monetary systems are controlled by the government? Okay. Now, on the other hand, if we have a monetary system like TBC that ends up being completely decentralized and is not controlled by any person, by any government or anything, there is no way that people could do that again, because they don't have a control of the one thing that people need, which is the monetary system. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So this is why I really like TBC, because when we have reached our full, when it becomes fully liquid, that we can use it everywhere in the marketplace, which will slowly take place as more people tune in. We will end up having the entire marketplace, and then it becomes completely decentralized, which means that nobody can go and take control of it. Isn't that a huge safeguard against this world falling into hands like it has been in for thousands of years now, especially the last couple of hundred years? We have been so deceived into thinking that basically humanity is evil. Oh yeah, oh, there's a child disappeared over there. Oh boy, we need more security. And oh, a store got robbed over there. Oh man, we need cameras. A bank got robbed. Oh boy, we really need a lot more surveillance. Is excuse me, when you walk down the street in any city, the people you work with or talk with, the people that you work with on your business, or people you eat with in the restaurant, or any of these people, would they be a person that would just up and rob a bank or a store or anything like that, unless somebody like George Soros, for instance, or other people like that had literally funded, literally put money out there and to people to go and create these things in the world, so that they can come in and say, oh, here, we've got a solution. We got a solution. We can put a lot more surveillance in here. Of course, the end goal isn't about keeping anybody safe. The end goal is about controlling them, so they can see you anytime they want, anywhere you are. They can always follow you. That's what it's about. How long are we blindly going to play their game? You see, with TBC now, we have a way out. We really do. We can reverse all of this, all of it, because once the money isn't being controlled by governments, by cabal, by anybody, then really humanity can return to peace and prosperity as it was originally, before these evildoers came along and started perpetrating. All right, that's where we're going with TBC. How long have I been? 30 minutes. Well, I think that pretty much concludes my my hangout for today. Oh, thank you for tuning in, Jacob. It's better late than never. But then I've been missing out on some of yours too. Now, I believe you're probably going to listen to this one from the beginning, Jacob, because I would be very interested in hearing your ideas about what I talked about, which I'm quite sure we can discuss if you go back and watch this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in, Susan. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today, all of you, and I appreciate very much that you tuned in to my channel today. And in my opinion, what I've talked about today is quite in-depth, and has been quite in-depth in some things that are not being talked about very much. And I believe that in order to lift this dark cloud from humanity, we need to have a currency for humanity that is not controlled by anybody. Something that is completely decentralized, which is what the plan is with TBC when it becomes fully liquid. And this gives us great motivation to follow the system, to do the training, and bring people into TBC and help them understand what is going on and what our way out is. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.